Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. A move that's supposed to save Hay River customers money on their power bills may lead to higher bills for everyone in the Northwest Territories. The Northwest Territories Power Corporation is just months away from becoming Hay River's new power distributor, taking over from NECA Power. It was touted as a chance for Hay River customers to save money, but as Luke Carroll reports, it's more complicated than that.
The Northwest Territories Power Corporation becoming the distributor for electricity in Hay River is one of the reasons it's applying for rate increases across the territory by about 18%. Low water levels, increased diesel prices, and inflation are also causing financial difficulties. It will cost NTPC millions to take over distribution in Hay River. $1.5 million will go towards salaries for 9 new employees. $500,000 toward a bucket truck to work on damaged poles, and around $1.5 million for new power meters for the town, among other expenses. Gordon Van Tighem is the chair of the NWT Public Utilities Board, which gets to decide whether the NTPC rate hike goes ahead. Van Tighem says these costs are adding to the application for increased rates. The NTPC is over budget on non-operating fuel costs. So these are things like staffing, infrastructure, all operational costs outside of fuel.
Some of the things that are contributing to the requested increase are increases in the non-fuel operating costs, which are about $9.3 million. The increase would be $6.6 million if the Hay River acquisition was excluded, so it's included in there.
A Hay River business owner says if a proposed power rate hike goes into effect, it'll be the end of her business.
Just can't afford it. That's all there is to it. Just can't. I'm a print shop. Presses, printers, all this equipment takes a lot of power.
Haywood says her current power bill is around $1,000 a month, and any additional costs would be too much to operate. The Power Corporation's application says Hay River customers will still get significantly lower rates even if the rate increase is approved.
We still expect to see that the people of Hay River will see a drop in the rates they have to pay after the franchise is taken over by NTPC.
This is because the cost for residential customers will match what Fort Smith pays, which the application says is much cheaper than Hay River rates. The Public Utilities Board is set to make a decision on the rate application by the end of the year. The NTPC will take over distribution for power in Hay River in March 2025. Luke Carroll, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The city of Yellowknife is proposing an 8% property tax increase. The city released its draft budget for 2025 yesterday. Its director of corporate services says the theme of this year's budget is Foundations for Growth.
Because the city of Yellowknife is at crossroads, not only with the way it does business and the services it offers, but also because of macroeconomic factors like volatile market conditions, climate change, and stagnating tax base.
The draft budget proposes total spending of just under $144 million in 2025. That's $12.5 million more than the city anticipates spending this year. Part of the proposed spending increase is to cover the cost of 10 additional full-time staff. Yellowknife City Council is scheduled to begin reviewing the budget on December 5th. Today, NWT government officials announced $25 million for a hydro expansion project in the territory. The money from the federal government aims to help the NWT transition to more low-carbon energy. The Talton Hydro facility is south of Great Slave Lake. The expansion will add a 60-megawatt facility near the existing one. The NWT's infrastructure minister says this project will double hydro capacity. Caroline Wozniak added that the final price tag and timeline is uncertain, but they feel positive looking forward.
I think this is an exciting place to be at. It's further along than we've been in the past, and we'll be in a better position in the course of this government to have the public conversations that are required to make the final decision.
The hydro project is in the pre-construction phase, and the required paperwork is still being completed. The new facility will aid in powering future mines, and government officials say they hope to capitalize on mineral resources soon. An NWT mining company is considering what to do after being told to look further into the future with its climate models. Diavik diamond mine is still sorting out the details of its closure plan. One of those details has to do with predictions about the future. Specifically, what may happen as a result of climate change in the decades after it completely shuts down. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink has more.
A climate model is a computer simulation. They can be used to see what will happen to the world under different degrees of warming. That makes them a valuable tool for big projects, including a diamond mine that's winding down. Diavik has run climate models to the year 2126 in its most recent closure and reclamation plan. But earlier this summer, the WKZ Land and Water Board told the company it needed to go further than 100 years. The decision is being lauded by an expert who's been using climate models for decades.
It blows my mind in a good way that the regulator is asking these questions. Like, the regulator is switched on. This is an important question to ask. How well you can answer it, I think, is interesting, but it is really important that the question is asked.
The data would come with limitations, though. Easterbrook says the further you go into the future, the more unreliable the information becomes. Diavik, meanwhile, says it's considering what to do now. It's required to do what the regulator tells it to. The outstanding questions are when Diavik will update those models and how far they'll go.
Discussions with like our stakeholders and partners are ongoing on this subject in terms of sort of like when and how it's appropriate and best to update that.
Sinclair says Diavik's final position will come out in the next version of its closure and reclamation plan. That's expected to happen in April. Leanie Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Yukon firefighters say the fire marshal's office needs more money. The office supports fire protection in the territory's smaller communities. The president of the Association of Yukon Fire Chiefs says there isn't enough funding to go around, and the result is outdated gear, trucks that need to be replaced, and crumbling fire halls. He says that is putting firefighters at higher risk.
Optional, right? No community has to have a fire department. But the problem is, once you decide to have one, and once the government decides to have one, then they have to operate it properly. They have to equip it properly. They have to meet the OH&S regulations required. So I think, if you look at the actual budget, the actual amount of money, especially when you compare it to some other similar services and what they cost, EMS, wildland fire, like the fire marshal's office budget is extremely small. And even the amount of money that it would cost to rectify all the things that we're talking about is very small compared to some of these other budgets that we look at. And, we definitely feels like the fire marshal's office is the poor cousin.
Zachas says he's written to the government. Yukon Community Services Minister Richard Mostyn says he's willing to meet with the territory's fire chiefs to discuss their concerns. Iqaluit City Council has voted yes to approve a bylaw that would redesignate green space in the city to allow for the development of single-family homes. Council voted on Tuesday night. The areas are located east of Tundra Ridge and southeast of Kiutat Lane on the southeast end of the city. Councillor Romine Stevenson voted in favor of the motion.
Will people want them? Are there going to be developers that are going to want to develop there? Of course, they're great looking places in logical areas of the city.
While Stevenson voted in favor, he did express concern over the area needing trucked water and says a piped water service would have been preferable. A public hearing on this issue was held in July. Residents then raised concerns about loss of green space, overcrowding, and having their ATV trails affected. Staying on the issue of housing, a village of tiny homes in downtown Inuvik is closer to becoming a reality. The CBC's Des Loreen has the details.
The village will have 8 tiny homes for clients escaping family violence. There will also be a bigger central building used for counseling, socializing, and programming.
Being able to transition folks with the housing that we're putting in place back into the community and support them along their journeys even more.
The Nitad-Gwich'in Council is building the village and delivering the programming. Eva Kratokwil works for the Inuvik Justice Committee in Inuvik. She hopes to see more programming aimed at stopping abusers and helping them heal.
We really need to be fighting for more of the stuff that's going to change things long term. The hope would be, 25 years. Maybe this wouldn't be necessary in 25 years if we have the right programs in place to actually help people.
This is the lot where the tiny home village will be built. McLeod says he hopes construction will be done by next summer and programs will be operational by fall of 2025. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
Donations to the War Amps have a lasting impact on amputees. Today, your support gives them the artificial limbs and resources they need for everyday activities and learning to live with amputation. Having access to our essential programs helps amputees prepare for tomorrow on their road to independence. The War Amps is committed to improving the quality of life for Canadian amputees, but this wouldn't be possible without you. To learn how your donation helps, visit waramps.ca.
This is a proposed corridor for multiple pipeline projects.
You're crossing our territory on two ends of your pipeline. Who gave you permission?
Pipelines break of the pipelines would destroy the water and everything in it.
They got to come through us first.
This is an immediate evacuation order for all Coastal GasLink employees. I feel like we are at war. It's just all been building up to this point.
Yenta on The Passionate Eye. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Release him.
Why?
Well, I would say it's extremely bad form to arrest your new boss.
This man is actually in my custody.
What did he do?
Well,
Did you hear that? I'm being charged with,
This ranch isn't going down. Not on my watch.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm so happy to have these prosthetic legs. I wear them every day so I can do all the things I love to do. I like to hike, skate, and do gymnastics. Because of your donations, Ramps is able to give me these devices. When you donate, you help kids like me. Thank you.
A teenager with Canada's first presumptive human case of avian flu is in critical condition at the BC Children's Hospital with acute respiratory distress.
I must caution that there is a very real possibility we may not ever determine a source. But at this point, we have a number of leads that we're following.
Dr. Henry says officials are working to track down the source of the infection. Health officials say the teen was not in school during the infectious period. Contact tracing on dozens of the teen's family and friends has not turned up any other cases. The teen also has no known exposure to poultry farms or wild birds where the virus is circulating. The Biden administration continues to defend Israel, saying it will not limit military arms sales to the country. That's despite the fact that aid groups say Israel failed to meet Washington's deadline yesterday to boost aid to Gaza. Sasha Petrusik reports.
There's two very different perspectives on what is going on in Gaza. Most of the world's aid organizations, agencies from the United Nations itself is describing a very dire situation when it comes to aid in Gaza. That there's not enough food. Certain areas are very close to famine, if not actually experiencing the famine right now. There is not enough equipment and materials for shelter. There's not enough medical supplies, clinics, hospitals. Those kinds of things are in very short supply. The U.S. put a limit on how long this can last. They said in 30 days that Israel had to solve the problem, had to get 350 trucks a day moving into the territory. That deadline expired, but despite the description from all of these aid organizations that work in Gaza, the U.S. government has said that Israel is trying to fix the problem and they're going to give it some more time. This is what they had to say from the State Department.
No one is up here, certainly I'm not, saying that the situation in Gaza or the humanitarian circumstances are rosy. It is a very dire circumstance, and what we need to see is we need to see these steps acted on. We need to see them implemented.
Now, Israel has a very different perspective of what the aid situation is in Gaza, essentially that there is no big problem. They are describing a situation where trucks are being allowed in. There's no barriers being put up, they say, even though they say that there are only about 76 trucks a day that make it into the territory, not the 350 that the Americans have said is absolutely needed. What is the problem? Well, they say aid organizations themselves are not bringing enough trucks, or the trucks aren't capable of moving around, or Hamas is stealing the food once it makes its way in there.
Our assessment is that there is enough food coming into the Gaza Strip. But if there is an organization that would like to increase the amount of food, all they need to do is coordinate that together with us. We have never placed a limit on the amount of humanitarian aid that can make its way into the Gaza Strip.
So, two very different perspectives about how big the problem is, but there is no question that people in Gaza are in fact having trouble getting food, getting shelter, and that problem doesn't seem to be changing very quickly. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
10 years after Canada's mission in Afghanistan ended, a group of Afghan Canadians are breaking their silence about their pivotal role. They provided linguistic and cultural advice to the Canadian Armed Forces, but as Olivia Stefanovich reports, they still haven't been recognized.
We have been ignored. We have been discriminated.
They were the eyes and ears of the Canadian Armed Forces, saving lives in Afghanistan. But when they returned home, they were denied the same benefits and health coverage as other veterans.
Now we have PTSD. We are sick.
I have no health coverage. I have no help from the Department of National Defense. Not even a call, not even appreciation, not even something to invite you, even for Veteran Days. I have to invite myself.
When the Afghan war began, Canada's military recruited these Afghan Canadians as not just translators, but advisors to interpret the culture and conditions.
You didn't go anywhere outside the wire without your LCA, and they took exactly the same risks that we did, dressed in the same uniform that we had. The only difference is they weren't armed.
Indeed, they looked like members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but because they were civilians on temporary contracts, the Department of National Defense denied them benefits and health coverage.
It's a shame, actually. These people served in so many ways alongside military men and women who served. A lot was asked of them.
We should be moving heaven and earth now that we know about it to make sure these LCAs get the supports that they deserve.
Opposition parties say they plan to raise the issue with the Minister of Defense as soon as Parliament resumes next week.
Canada has a moral obligation to support the people who supported our country in the mission in Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, Canada's military watchdog is conducting her own investigation.
If the country and the department fails to act, I think they're going to have a very hard time making the case to recruit people to do this type of work moving forward.
In a statement, the Defense Minister's office says he's aware of the challenges and is working with DND's Ombud, who is expected to release her final report early in the new year. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada is leading a multinational NATO brigade in Latvia, conducting one of the largest military exercises of its kind in decades. Briar Stewart gives us rare access to the field maneuvers.
I'm on a military base near Riga, Latvia, and I'm in the Canadian LAV 6. This is a light armored vehicle, And they're basically doing a demonstration for the media here, but this is all part of a large NATO exercise called Resolute Warrior. It's the largest international exercise that Canada has led since the 1980s. And this is significant because Canada has helped to form a brigade here. There are 3,500 troops involved in this exercise. Over 2,000 of them are from Canada. And this is all part of a NATO effort to beef up security in the Baltics. Latvia shares a nearly 300-kilometer-long border with Russia. And after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the full-scale invasion which began in 2022, they really wanted to beef up security in the Baltics, and Canada is playing a big part of it. And part of this exercise is figuring out all of the logistics and how to integrate all of the different equipment and troops from different NATO nations. 13 countries are involved in this exercise, and there's going to be an annual exercise held here every year. Briar Stewart, CBC News, near Riga, Latvia.
Members of the Ukrainian-Canadian Association of the Yukon have arrived in the city of Chortkiv, Whitehorse's sister city. They've brought medical supplies and other donations. 3 members of the group spoke to the CBC from Chortkiv earlier today.
What we brought was, I don't know, about 10 boxes of hospital medications that are going to go to the hospital here in Chortkiv and out to the front lines.
Hand warmers and foot warmers, which is huge right now because what's happened, soldiers are now spending longer times out on the front because there are fewer people to rotate. So instead of say 5 days, they're spending 2 weeks to 3 weeks. And so they need things to help them be able to stay warm and basically survive.
The number one goal was to bring all this medicine, warm clothing, medical gear, and also a sense of hope to these people, to bring smiles and hugs. I went to a soldier's hospital yesterday, and I met about 100 soldiers, ranging from, men who are in their early 20s to men in their 60s. Some of these men had just come off the front line, and they looked like they came off the front line just yesterday. Others were there missing limbs. And I hugged almost every one of them. And I have a childhood kind of Ukrainian in my back of my brain from when I went to Ukrainian school as a kid. And I, tried to speak to them as much as I can and just offer them support. And when we told them when we were from Canada, all these people in this country know, oh, I had a cousin that moved to Canada 100 years ago, or my relatives went to Saskatchewan at the turn of the century, or I have a friend that went to Toronto. So Canadians and Ukrainians have this deep historical connection that is just so personal. It's all the feelings, and it's hard to really understand because this is a country at war, but people are all just living their lives and doing what they can to survive. But also everything extra they have is going to help support the war effort.
Those are members of the Ukrainian-Canadian Association of the Yukon speaking to us from Ukraine. The Yukon Law Line is celebrating its 40th anniversary. The line provides free legal information, but not advice, to anyone who calls. The nonprofit that runs the line says demand for legal information is growing, and so is the number of people representing themselves in court. That can cause people a lot of stress.
Dealing with some of the really core issues in their lives. Family law, like Mara said, is a really big one. Whether you're seeing your kids or not, what you're doing with your house, probably your biggest asset, those are issues that get decided in that venue. These are some of the most important things that people are going to face. The law is not entirely simple in that respect, and people are stressed, they're upset, and they're trying to do one of the most complicated things they'll have to do in their lives. And so the danger of getting things wrong, the risks of things going sideways are really high in that context.
Meganson says people representing themselves can inadvertently cause delays in the court system. He says there's also a growing wait for private lawyers in the Yukon. This coming year will mark 25 years since Students on Ice sailed off on its first expedition. Expedition team leader Tracy Moore says over the past 25 years, the organization has had over 3,000 participants across Inuit Nunangat and southern Canada. Participants sailed on various expeditions while exploring communities and seeing Inuit Nunangat.
We had so many interactions with elders. It was, one of our most amazing SOI expeditions, as I like to say for everyone, because the people and the place really make the expeditions. So for us, we were really lucky.
Applications are now available for youth between 14 and 30 years of age. Now, let's take a look at the weather. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. We leave you with a look at the new bridge that opened today in Apex, Nunavut. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm so happy to have these prosthetic legs. I wear them every day so I can do all the things I love to do. I like to hike, skate, and do gymnastics. Because of your donations, Lamps is able to give me these devices. When you donate, you help kids like me. Thank you.
I know that I've been reckless, but it won't happen again. I love my daughter so much. I just need a chance to prove myself. Hello?
What'd you do?
I'm a thief.
There
making more money than they have ever made in the history of the music business.
We have generation after generation of us not seeing a fair piece of the pie.
How do we keep the money from Black music in Black people's hands?
Join me for Commotion, available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.